Beacon R Sigma 9 never cared about species ceilings. It cared about signals, throughput, noise, and collapse margins. Unfortunately for the Relay Fleet Directorate, its caretakers cared more about ceilings than signals. Kira Vale's rattling courier pod, Messenger 4, skimmed the Magnetar lit edge of the neutral relay spine. It looked like a scuffed gray bullet with a cockpit, because it was one. Inside, the ride was worse than the exterior promised. A nest of patched conduits snaked the floor like metal ivy. The navboard flickered a temperamental violet. 2 screws occasionally vibrated themselves loose and pinged off the inner hull. Courier pods weren't meant to be elegant. They were meant to work. And work meant speed without permission. Across from her channel, the crystalline carrier arrays of our Sigma 9 refracted starfire like floating cathedrals. Their exteriors were sculpted, symmetrical, and arrogantly silent, the kind of silence that told you it had never doubted itself a day in its life. Kira doubted everything. Constantly, quietly, productively, the long range. Chimed. Routine packet request from the Directorate. She tapped accept, and the payload chest in the pod thunked as if it resented being part of civilization. The interior gate whirred open, reluctantly revealing geophysical canisters, data burner slates, and a sealed analog holotape. The physical proof archive format that alien Doctrine officers insisted was human appropriate. 4 predictable species logistics. Predictable. The word again. Always from them. Never from physics. Kira's eyes slid toward the floating beacon spine ahead, where System R Sigma 9's core beacon node pulsed every 0.6 seconds like a heartbeat made of radio. The rhythm was normally clean. Today, one interval jittered 0.0004 seconds late, meaningless to most. Screaming to her, she logged it invisibly. No sigh, no gasp. Just the mental click of a clock she didn't fully understand yet. The hatch sealed. The pod shuddered forward, behind a spanning glass observatory and fleet system control. Blue uniformed officers hovered over cascading courier projections. Their plating exosuits gleamed with cold polish and data sigils as rigid as theology. One such officer, Prefect Drax ORM -9, stood in the center, arms clasped behind his back, reading newsfeed summaries printed on a physical slate because he also didn't fully trust digital. Unlike Kira, he distrusted it out of fear, not in sight. A cluster of teenage alien interns surrounded his station like startled moons around a stubborn planet. They were the newest generation of Doctrine keepers trained to root, not rewrite. Interns Selene AX3, small, sharp-eyed, and quietly curious, a cardinal sin in fleet training, watched the projections shift, then lifted his gaze toward the channel containing the human courier. On the starboard display, "She's early," Selene said. "No," Drax replied. "Not looking up, she is statistically ahead of projection." "There is a difference." Selene's brow plates pinched. "One saves seconds. One insults math." "Which is she?" "Neither," Drax said, sliding the slate under his arm. "She is a young human courier. They do not insult Doctrine or rewrite Doctrine. They carry packages. They do it efficiently." End of profile. Lynn leaned closer to the glowing spine projection. End of profile tends to be where history starts. Drax finally looked at him, towered at him. Really? Exosuit plating magnified the effect. History is the graveyard of undisciplined conjecture. Doctrine durability is our mandate. Selene didn't break eye contact, which was brave, stupid, or proto-human, depending on your taxonomy. Mandates fail before mandates know they're failing. Control officer behind them cleared his throat. "Courier throughput on run 994 Vale is..." "Read it aloud," Drax commanded. The officer swallowed. Not dramatically, efficiently. 7.8% ahead of latency projection for the 11th consecutive run. The room became very still for a civil service second. Drax sniffed, which was hard to do inside a pressurized exohelm, but somehow he managed to convey it. Outlier clustering. Anomaly by frequency, not capability. Selene nodded. Frequency precedes capability. Storms start with weather forecasts, but forecasts don't cause storms. Kira was listening to none of this, though that didn't stop her from being its thematic conclusion. She opened the pod's lower logic panel, rewired 3 contacts without breaking speed, and pulled up Doctrine reference notes. There were rules. There were also consequences. Her favorite consequences were the kind where rules begged for reinterpretation afterward. Messenger 4's interior mic crackled. A short-range hail from fleet control. Selen had gambled and initiated a voice channel manually, overriding protocol in a half-anonymous risk window. Kira Vale, Selen said through static. Do you always run early, or are you early by philosophy? Kira pressed the mic key. It thunked a little to hardware solidarity. Late signals cost lives, she said. Early ones cost egos. I only invoice one of those. Selen blinked, delighted and horrified. Which one do you bill? The one that can pay me back in latency, she replied. Drax jerked the cum channel open at that moment, which would later be ironic in posthumous analyses. Kira Vale. Drax's voice boomed through an exoprocessed reverb layer. Doctrine governs communication ceilings. You do not exceed your species ceiling. You exceed a projection tolerance, and tolerances curve inward eventually. That sounds like a threat, she said. It is a guarantee, Drax replied. Kira snorted softly. Okay. That part was extra, but she earned it. Guarantees curve hardest when plotted against humans. Selen's cum cut. Someone hit the mute. Likely an alien, possibly reality itself. But the seed was planted. Read overrun speed. Resident Courier doubts. Doctrine intimidation cracks. Meanwhile, Kira ejected a capsule into the beacon intake port, precisely on the 990-40H microsecond of clearance. Seconds mattered. Her hands were ahead of Doctrine because Doctrine assumed. Human hands couldn't make Doctrine faster than Doctrine assumed hands were allowed to exist. 2 screws pinged loose again. Predictable bolts, she whispered to no one. The final approach toward the beacon node loomed. The first flicker she logged earlier pinged in her mind one more time. Not as a storyline device, but as a future obituary for all signal supremacy theories that required permits before fingers. For now, though, the beacon was intact, Doctrine unchanged, and humanity unrevoked. Kira powered Messenger for past the cathedral arrays. Tiny frame courier, outrunning aperture bias, carrying packets that fleet Doctrine thought were uninnovative and destined to remain that way. The beacon pulsed clean again. Lean dan lil seconds. Lean dan lil seconds. 0.604 seconds? Only once. She logged it too. No nonsense. No repetition. No permission. Just a courier, a clock, and Doctrine that didn't know it was already being measured against a human future. The delay began like all bureaucratic catastrophes, small enough to excuse, dangerous enough to kill, and invisible to anyone who worshipped protocol over pulse. Kira Vale felt the beacon stutter first in her bones. Not a poetic instinct, a mechanical truth. The spine beacon, or Sigma 9, was failing from the inside out, corroded by a micro-black cascade, the kind that didn't explode. It poisoned timing. Hyperlanes hummed nervous. Pings arrived late, then wrong, then not at all. Her pod Messenger 4 wasn't built for comfort, but it was engineered for a genre Fleet Doctrine had shelved centuries ago, getting things done before they were forbidden to do so. The courier cradle rattled as she pulled up diagnostic overlay. Routing coherence was bleeding phase. Latency was climbing a cliff. 1 more minute at this rate, and the relay spine corridor authority would lock the lanes, stranding every ship using the corridor, and something would be far worse than stranded, predictably stranded. She opened the mic. Control. This is Courier Run 994 KV. Beacon R Sigma 9 is out of cadence. Requesting immediate manual rewrite clearance. Response arrived after a beat too long. Signature sound of a man who believed Doctrine was armor and improvisation was. Flinching, it was Prefect Drax ORM 9, Senior Signal Prefect of the Fleet Doctrine Bureau. Kira Vale, he said, pronouncing the name like a misplaced checksum. Manual doctrine rewrite requires species authorization. Trisigil audit stamps, quorum convergence, approval, and rewrite notarization. You have none of these.
What?
The corridor has 54 trillion credits worth of traffic on it, she said. It has 93 seconds of structural tolerance left. It isn't going to sign forms, Drax. Drax inhaled sharply. Hyperlane stability is directorate jurisdiction. Do your job. Deliver the packet. Leave doctrine to authorized species. Kira let the silence stretch, not for tension, for calculation. Then, no authorized species are doing anything. That looks like a jurisdictional failure to me. Somewhere behind Drax. Interns were whispering loud enough to rattle radio. She heard one clearly before the channel filter smoothed it out. Prefect. She's right. The doctrine is choking the lane. It was Selen X3's voice again. Curious. Brittle-brave.drax snapped back. Curiosity sinks fleets in turn. Kira keyed in, low and flat. Clearance sinks them faster. The beacon flashed error amber now, not colored, emotioned. The lanes jittered further. Navigation anchors drifted. Carrier buoys misaligned. A freighter the size of a city groaned across the lane. Compensator fins glowing red-hot just to maintain vector. That groan became a distress call. Freighter Atlas 9, we can't hold the lane if pings don't match vector. Authority, override. Authority didn't override. A human courier did. Kira killed the coaster thrusters and punched the lane toward our Sigma 9 service node. The shipboard spectral locks were tuned to coalition species signatures, elegant frequency carvings. Impossible to pick by most. Assumed impossible to spoof by human. Classification. She spoofed nothing. She hand-coded the bypass. The lock accepted not because it was fooled, but because it was overwhelmed by superior intent and cleaner signal topology than permit signals had ever carried. Messenger 2-4 slammed against the service gantry. Her boots hit alien metal with a quiet confidence that sounded unimportant. Until you felt it, the freighter traffic. Around her didn't slow, but it noticed. Normative doctrine officers would later call this moment when anomaly exceeded. Projection inward enough that reality decurved. Kira called it something. Shorter, clocks running, she whispered. Selen's mic channel flared open again. Direct feed through an unsecured inner node. Courier. If you touch the doctrine terminal without audit keys, it'll cascade wipe your authorization marker. You'll never be cleared for a run again. She dragged a cable clamp off Messenger 4's crate and plugged it into the beacon's spinal logic interface. Good, she said. Twice the speed, none the paperwork. Selen Blink laughed nervously. That's not how clearance works. Yet, she said. Drax's voice cut back in. Cold, processed velvet sprayed over steel. Courier Vale. Cease unauthorized modifications to a directorate node. Innovation attempts by unauthorized species invalidate doctrine continuity, risking corridor superstability class review. And I've got 21 seconds left, Drax, she said, cutting the reverb like it cost her oxygen. You've got 14-second doctrine lockout incoming. If you want to save doctrine continuity, stop talking. If you want to save the corridor, start panicking. Selen stiffened. Doctrine window. A spectral counter appeared on the beacon's outer shell, a risk impotence countdown. Shimmering silver sigils that even interns knew were symbolic. They lit only for fleet. Dignitaries or auditors. But today it wasn't. Symbolic today, the system was literally dying by countdown dread. Sparks licked the terminal as cascade load hit, 91.8%. I am possible window, Drax said, quieter now, doctrine dense showing. Not literal, rewrite aperture. Kira reached terminal. It's literal when it kills you. Selen rushed forward. If I give you the AX Auditor seed key I lifted for emergency theory review exercises, can you even use it? It's alien-carved cipher. She cracked her knuckles and flipped the terminal hatch. I don't use carved doctrine. I use seconds. Counter screamed down. 14 seconds. The terminal flared open. Data ribbons surged like panicked serpents made of light, racing outward toward destabilizing buoys. Freighter Atlas 9 was bleeding output pressure, trying to remain anchored. The Corridor Authority panicked across all digital channels, asking why sector-authorized species were failing to contain a temporal fracture event. No one answered, because no one with authority had hands on console. Kira. DID hardware didn't need carved species markers. It needed the fastest, unmuted. Fingers in the corridor, Kira slapped both hands on the Doctrine. Terminal? Everyone watched. Time watched back. And that was when Chapter 2 stopped being about collapse and started being about the 14 seconds that would bury 1,000 Doctrines, deport Kira upward, and reclassify humans forever. But rewriting takes place next chapter. For now, A. Human Courier had declared war on delay itself, and the corridor had begun holding its breath to see if the clock blinked first.